Hello and welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at geometry nodes and how to create plants. Let's get started. So I just wanted to cut this in real quick and let you know, so where we're going with this tutorial is we're just going to create the model that you see here. So what we finished at the end of this tutorial is with one of these guys, and I've just duplicated it out and arranged it in a couple of different ways. So we're not going to cover the materials, all that stuff. If you want to find out how I make the materials in the final image, you can find that in the live stream over on Patreon, or you can find it by joining on YouTube as a channel member at the All Access Pass level and higher. So it was about a 2-hour-long live stream that I made this final image. So that is available there. So this tutorial is going to cover the modeling and the entire geometry node setup from beginning to end. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so I was looking the other day trying to figure out how to create a flower, and flowers use a specific, they use something called the golden ratio, right? They kind of follow this pattern of this specific spiral shape. And you can see it play out in things like the center of this flower here. And it's the same as like with the way the petals are laid out. It's a specific ratio in terms of how things are laid out. And I was trying to figure out how you could do this in geometry nodes. And so I was looking around, and anyways, I found this old post on the Blender Stack Exchange where somebody had figured out how to do it with Python. So they wrote this bit of code that creates this spiral. What we're going to do is we're going to follow this code line by line, and we're going to recreate it, but using geometry nodes. So, I mean, it would run just like this. Like if I just, click play, right? You can see we get this bit just from this code, right? This is a really cool spiral object. We're going to do this in GeoNodes. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to click on this timeline, and I'm going to pull up my geometry node editor. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create something, doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to create a cube, and I'll click new to create new geometry nodes. I'll zoom in here so we can see everything. Now, first thing I'm going to do is just get rid of the geometry nodes group input. We don't need that. And instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mesh primitive line, and I'll plug that into geometry. Now the mesh primitive line, all it does is it creates a line, and it creates an object with, in this case, 10 vertices. I'll drag this out here, and I'll grab my spreadsheet so we can see what's going on. So you can see we have 10 vectors for the different points on this line. First thing is it defines this variable in, which is this little note here says this is the number of points. So it defines 1,000 points. And then there's a scale factor, which is defined as C. So C is 0.1, and that's the scale factor. Now this is the most important part. We've got this loop here. So for I in range 0, n. So what does this mean? So for I is creating a new variable called I, and it's basically saying for everything in the range of 0 to n. And what's n? Well, n's already been defined as 1,000, which is the number of points. So for every time, so basically it cycles through from 0 to 1,000 is what this is doing. And each time it does, it's going to increment the variable I. So it's going to go up. So at first it'll be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3. Now it defines a new variable called theta. And theta is I, so the number of whatever, number we're at, so between 0 and 1,000, times math.radians 137.5. So this is the ratio. 137.5 is the golden ratio. So it converts it into radians, multiplies it by I, and then what it does is it creates a new variable called R, and it takes C, which is the scale factor, and then it takes the square root of I, and it multiplies those together, and then it takes adds a new vertex. This is what this bm.verts.new, and this new vertex. So it creates a new vertex in the mesh, and it puts it at the cosine of theta times r, and then so that's the x, and then the y is the sine of theta times r, and then z is 0. So it just keeps it flat on the z. So that's x, y, and z. So first thing is let's just imitate this exactly. All right, so n is 1,000. So let's get a value node. Now, just so we're clear, I'm going to take this value node and I'm going to rename it. I'll call it n, right? And I'll call it n and then comma number of points. So that's what this is called. Now, we'll take this n number of points and we're going to set it to 1,000, just like they've done in the code here, and we'll plug it into count. And we have now 1,000 points. So we're going to grab an attribute separate XYZ, and we're going to take the geometry and plug it into here, and we'll plug the geometry into the output. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the position, and this is going to be, I'll drag this out so you can see result X, Y, and Z. We only want the Z. we're going to create a new attribute called ID, and we'll store it there. Now you can see that each one of these has an ID, and it's a whole number counting all the way up, and it corresponds to the number that's over here. And the reason why that works is because of this, the fact that the offset is set to 1. So every single one of these points is 1 higher on the Z. So if I'm using the Z value and storing it as ID, then that means I'm going to have a count that corresponds to the number. Hope that makes sense. Anyways, that's important. We got to have that. We're going to need to create a new variable called theta. So we want I, which is the ID in our case. We could just make it the same, actually. We could just call I. So it's really, really clear. Let's get a math node. Drop that down. 2 radians. And then we're going to type in 137.5. So this is going to do this part of the equation, math.radians. So we've just done the same thing here. So this is the value that's going to come out. So we need to multiply this value by I and call it theta. So let's grab an attribute math node, drop it here. We're going to do multiply, and we're going to take a float, pop that into here, and we'll take I, and we'll store the result in a new attribute called theta, just like in the code. So now you can see we've got theta. There you go. All right. Now we need R equals C times math square root of I. So let's go ahead and do the square root of I first. So again, I'll just Shift D to duplicate. Actually, no, we're going to have to do that through every iteration. So we'll use attribute math again. Attribute math, we'll drop this here, and we're going to go for the square root. So the square root of I, and we'll store this in a value. I'll call it I squared. And then what we'll do is we'll take I squared and we'll multiply it by C, which was the scale factor. So let's do that. So let's duplicate this attribute math mode. So we'll take the I. Actually, we could probably just take, do we need to do any more math with I? No. Okay, so we can actually simplify this and we can just store the result in I. So we'll just save over I. So we're going to multiply, make this the float, make this the attribute. So we're going to multiply C by I, and C is 0.1 is the value. I might, just to be clear, create another value node, and I'll call this value node C, which is my scale factor. 1 is the value for that. So I'll plug that into here. So I can just bring that over here. So I've got my scale factor and my number of, and we're going to store this in R. So we've got R. Now we need to move these points. We can grab attribute math node, and we're going to get the cosine of theta, and we can just store it. No, we can't store it over because we need to use theta again. So we'll call this theta cos. Actually, we could save these instead of theta cos. I could just save these as x, y, x and y. Yeah, that would make sense. So I'll save this as x instead. Attribute math, bring this one over. So now we're going to get the sine, not the cosine, but the sine of theta, and we'll store this in y. And then we also need to multiply both of these by R, which is the scaling factor. So I'll do this, another attribute math. We'll go multiply, and we're going to multiply x by our scale factor, which is R. And I'll save it over into x, and I'll do the same thing here, but with y. So we'll grab y, and we'll save it to y. So now I've multiplied both of those by R. And Z we don't need to worry about. That's just 0. So now what we can do is we'll just use this attribute combine x, y, z node, and we'll put x in the x, we'll put y in the y, and z we'll make a float. We'll just make it 0, and we'll store this in the pose. Actually, I'll just plug it in so we can actually get the drop-down menu. Position, bam, all right, there we go. So you can see we followed this code step by step, and you may not even need to understand, exactly what's happening in the code, right? If this math is over your head, you can see how you can kind of follow these steps and put them in some kind of order in a way that works. Now, what's really cool is if I grab a group input, I can actually create two new inputs. I can grab this one and this one, and I can name them. So this one's going to be a number of points, and this one is going to be the scale. And then if I go over to my geometry nodes thing, I get these options. So now you can see I can drag this up, and it's going to continue to expand the number of points. I can change the size of it with the scale factor, and it all works. So what do we do with something? Let's see. Let's create a bit of mesh. I can get rid of this and this now. I can drag this down so you can see this a bit better. And what we could do is create a UV sphere, let's say. I'm going to shade smooth. And let's see, I will grab, what do I want to grab? Go to X-ray view, shift box select the bottom bit, I could just scale them in. Just to create kind of like a little seed pod sort of thing. I could take this center vertex and delete it as well. I could grab this inner ring here and hit E to extrude and grab it down. F3 grid fill. Call this my, all right, so anyways, we can take this, I'll drag this up here. We're going to do a point instance node. And after you like create, something like this, you could drag a point instance down. We can select the pod. We'll need to scale it. So I'm going to go for a point scale and drop it right before. And I'll grab a value node, drop it right here. Now I can drag this down. You can see we start to get something that's very similar to the seed pod that we were looking in that original flower image, which is pretty rad. We could also put a little bit of randomness into this. So grab this here and let's grab attribute randomize, and I'll just drop this here. We'll get rid of the scale because we're going to randomize the scale. Is it a vector? Oh, that's right. You have to switch it here. So we set that to vector. We can grab the position and we'll go to that. Oh, no, not position, sorry, scale. Go to that. And then we'll take the value here and I will make the value, I'll just set them both to 1 for now. And then we can just hold down shift. Well, first let's get a value that works well for the whole thing overall. So I will drag this down until they start to touch a little bit. I reckon that looks good. So 0.18. So let's copy that number, paste it here, put this one in the bottom, and then let's just shift this a little bit. Maybe bring this one down just a little bit. And now it's going to randomly scale between those two. They're all just a little bit different. We could do the same thing for rotation. So we'll stick with vectors, fine, and let's go rotation. Grab the value. I'll stick this into here. Find just a base value that works. So pi is going to make them face straight up. So I'll drag this down and I'll just take the second one and I'll just hold shift and drag just a little bit. And I'll grab this one, hold shift and drag the other way just a little bit. And that just kind of offsets them all a little. So they're all just like slightly different. And that kind of stuff's really, really useful in terms of creating realism. Now, the next thing we'd want is to kind of have it like puff up, right? Let's grab a attribute vector math node. And we'll drop it in here, and I'm going to go for a length calculation. What length does, it takes the origin point, and it figures out how far away every point is from the origin. So I'm going to take the position of all my points, and I'll store this in, I'll call this length, and then we can use this to offset the height except we need to invert it because length is the number smallest here, biggest out here. So let's grab a attribute color ramp node, and we'll take length, and then we'll store it in length. So we'll just overwrite length. Get a attribute map range node, because we are going to use that. And we are going to map the length, and we'll store it in length. I'll figure that out in a second. And then this is going to just give us basically the Z value that we want to be adding in. Yeah, so what I'll do is or I could just convert it into a vector, right? Because let's have a look at what the spreadsheet shows us. So yeah, length is just a floating point number. So what is it? Is it convert, attribute convert, this attribute length, a vector? And save over it. Does that work? Yep, that turns it into a vector. And I'm going to invert this. So I'm going to make this 1 and that 0. That will flip these. So the stuff that's closest will be the highest number, and the furthest away will be the lowest number. And then what we can do is I need to get rid of the x and y because I just want to work with the z. So let's grab an attribute vector math node, throw this down here, switch it to multiply. We're going to grab length, and we're going to multiply it by a vector, and we're going to have 0, 0, and 1. So let's save that over. So now length will have 0, 0, and then only the z value will have a worth in it. And then let's grab an attribute math node, attribute vector math node, sorry, position, and we're going to add it to length, and we will store that in position. Now we don't have any control on it, but that's all right because we can add that in right here by going attribute vector math, and we could multiply the attribute length by a value. So let's switch this to vector, and we'll store this in length. And then we can create a value node and drop it here. And then this will be our sort of factor that we can scale, which looks pretty good. It's not very rounded, right? It's quite linear. We're adding it there. So let's add the color ramp, attribute color ramp node here. So if I take length and I overwrite length. Now the reason why it's skewing is because we're adding into the X, Y, and Z by coming into this white node here and getting rid of the R and the G and just use blue. Because it just translates it as X, Y, and Z. All right, so let's think. What's going to be the go linear? So that looks good. There's a bit of fall off there, you can see. What happens if we flip these? Is that going to just give it to us like that? Yeah. Probably don't need to be using that map range node anymore. But anyways, you can see now we got a nice subtle fall off. We could switch this to ease. It'll round it a little bit more. It's pretty cool. So you can see it's dynamic as well, right? Because we come back here and increase the number of points. It's going to keep growing. All right, where's my my pod? Now we're going to go crazy. Because who wants to make a sunflower? I mean, really, when you could make some kind of alien plant. That's my question to the universe. We should have some leaves, maybe a couple of like really big leaves. I think they could look nice. Correct my view here. Scale this up. Go into edit mode. Control R. Grab this point. Grab it on the X. Turn off proportion editing. Pull that out. Scale Y. Bring them in. Grab my knife tool. And cut from here to here. I'll actually delete these two faces. So it's a little more clean setup. I'll hit E to extrude, grab X, pull them out. Scale X, scale Y, bring them in. Scale X 0 like that, and then grab this one out on the X like so. Now if I put on a subdivision surface modifier, crank up those subdivisions. I can grab, let's see, I'll do a loop cut right here. I'll just grab it all the way in and then grab Y a little bit. Control R. Do another loop cut here. Grab that center bit and I'll just grab it down a little bit. That will help to create that sort of center, divot. There we go. Now let's take this and let's take these guys and grab them up. Switch X-ray mode back on, pull that up. Kind of curve it a little bit. And I think I should grab these middle bits like so and grab them down a bit. That looks all right. Increase those subdivisions. Oh, we're upside down. Ha! Y. Let's bring this around. Grab it on the X. Scale it down a little bit. Looks pretty good. And I could go Shift A, and we're going to create mesh primitive circle. And then I'll just bring it all the way over here to the end. Grab a join geometry, stick this here, and then we'll grab another point instance and we'll grab our leaf object. I'll put this leaf object in my hidden collection as well. Select these guys again, take the geometry into the geometry and up here to the join. And now I can increase the radius. Yeah, switch it to the leaf. There we go. All right. And I can change the number that I want. Now we need to rotate all of them. So how do we do that? Align rotation to vector. Is that going to do it? I grab an attribute position node. Hey, bingo. That's what we wanted. What I can do now is I need to rotate them. So let's go point rotate. Let's do, oh, okay, so just writes, does it overwrite it? Oh no, there we go. So I'll set that to 0, set this to 0, set this to 180. There we go. Oh, not quite 180. I still have one that's not doing it. It's kind of cool, actually. I wonder why it's doing that. Object point, axis angle. Same problem. I then just do attribute math, maybe vector math. I'll take the rotation and there you go. So pi, and then bring them up a bit like this. You radius down a bit so it's nice and snug against the center section. Decrease the number of vertices so they don't overlap as much. Probably simplest just to take this group and duplicate it. And duplicate that. And add this into the geometry as well. This one I can take my radius up a little bit. Translate, transform. There it is, transform. I can rotate the whole system. But we're going to have to offset those guys. So yeah, we can peel them down a little bit more. That's pretty good. Just offset that. Looks nice. So anyways, hope you really found this helpful and interesting. See, I've pushed this Follow Texas spiral system pretty far and just added a ton of different materials and things to really flesh this out. So this was a almost 2-hour long live stream where I created this image. If you'd like to watch the full uncut version, you can find it on Patreon or you can find it on YouTube. For channel members there at the All Access Pass level and higher. So you can go check that out. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And if you have any other tutorial ideas you'd like to see, don't forget to check out the Discord. We've got a link in the description below, as well as the Patreon and all that. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks again for watching. And thanks for checking out the channel. I will catch you in the next tutorial. Until then, see ya. Bye.